welcome to the RMCC compliance updates for June and July in the Northeastern region. In Connecticut, Connecticut activists lament cannabis gifting event ban. Cannabis activists are lamenting the loss of so-called gifting events in the wake of Governor Ned Lamont signing HB 5329 into effect on May 24th, banning cannabis gifting events. The law came in the wake of the success of Hamden, Connecticut's High Bazaar, a weekly event that started in July 2021, shortly after the state first legalized adult use cannabis. At that point, the state had yet to craft the regulations for its adult use market, but vendors were able to use a gifting provision to share cannabis products, often in exchange for donations. Before HB 5329 had even been introduced to the legislature, the town of Hamden had sued the organizers of High Bazaar, who had become victims of their own success, eventually fielding over 1,000 visitors in a single day, which drew the attention of local media and zoning code inspectors. The new state law outlaws gifting cannabis as a transaction, which means there is an exchange. Smaller interchanges, such as a handing of a joint to a random person with no expectation, is still permitted. The anti-gifting component of the bill came after the emergence of large gifting events following the legalization of adult use cannabis in Connecticut in July 2021. The most notorious being the High Bazaar, which is in Rep. Mike DeGastino's district. DeGastino served as one of the original sponsors of HB 5329. The state legislature passed the bill in May after amending the language to pull back on earlier prohibitions against billboard advertising for cannabis businesses. The newer version allowed limited advertising but barred out-of-state operators such as those in Massachusetts who had previously rented billboards advertising that drivers near the Massachusetts border were getting closer to legal adult use sales. The new law also updated some of the regulations surrounding social equity cannabis applicants, including allowing existing cultivators to party with two different social equity applicants in joint equity ventures as a means to increase access to capital for the new operators. Connecticut faces over 3,000 adult use cannabis applications ahead of its July meeting. So Connecticut is officially wading through 37,295 applicants for adult use cannabis license, of which no more than 97 could possibly be awarded in the state's first of adult use licensing. The State Social Equity Council is posed to at least start the approval process for 41 prospective cultivators and aspiring holders of 28 slots held open for social equity only holders for 8 different types of cannabis licenses in the coming weeks. All right, in Maine, Maine Office of Cannabis Policy adopts rule changes effective July 1st, 2021. And again, this is a update from ProCanna. So these changes are effective July 1st, 2021 and applies to organizations for cultivation, manufacturing, retail, testing facility, nursery cultivation, and administrative and financial services. So essentially, these rules implements statutory changes made to the Marijuana Legalization Act 28-B MRS Chapter 1, specifically PL 2021, Chess 226 and 314, including changes to the definitions of marijuana trim and mother plant, striking the requirement that sample collector licenses obtain a sales tax ID, and permitting the creation of a controlled entry area within the licensed premise of a marijuana store. This rulemaking also reconfigures the license application process to require detailed information regarding operations, cultivation, facility layout, and co-location of adult use licenses and/or licenses and medical program registrants at the active licensure phase as opposed to the conditional licensure phase. Finally, this rulemaking clarifies the regulation of licenses, brands, and logos, permits the use of reusable packaging, and reduces the information required on marijuana product labels. All right, another one out of Maine. Maine OCP seeks crackdown on improper packaging of illicit edibles. So Maine's Office of Cannabis Policy pledged to crack down on improper cannabis packaging labels, particularly those that indicate out-of-state sources, in an open memo released Wednesday, June 1st. The state of Maine currently has 8 medical cannabis dispensaries, but that figure does not account for the over 3,000 licensed cannabis caregivers in the state, each of which are allowed to open medical cannabis storefronts. The state also does not currently require medical cannabis providers to track sales, making it difficult for the state to track illicit sales that may or may not be taking place in caregiver storefronts. Despite this limitation, the state has reported an increase in complaints for improper sales. The state provided photos of seized edibles whose packaging mimicked Wonka bars, Nerd Ropes, Swedish Fish, and Sour Patch Kids, redubbed as Stony Patch. Aside from the copyright and intellectual property concerns, some of these photos include packages with symbols indicating that they were produced in California. The ongoing concerns over the sale of illicit products comes amid ongoing discussion over regulating Maine's medical cannabis market. So this just makes me giggle because Maine pretty much has 2 separate frameworks. They have their medical and they have their adult use side. Their medical side is more the caregiver side, which we also saw in Michigan, which is a little loosey-goosey, but as long as they're not harming patients, then I'm personally for it. I do find it interesting that there are products that are like from California, or we see this really common with the IP concerns around, Wonka bars and Sour Patch Kids and Swedish Fish getting medicated. So very interesting, definitely not in the caregiver's favor, unfortunately, with all of this. So this is just giving the state more ammunition to crack down on them. But, the best of luck, Maine. You guys are putting your best foot forward. You are really fighting tooth and nail to not be overregulated. I had a great conversation with Matt from Garden of Gela, and he was one of the first adult use licenses in Maine, but also came from the caregiver market. Also was from Northern California before moving out to Maine. So it's the very first episode in season 2 of the podcast, Elevated Businesses. So definitely go check that out. It's a very interesting conversation. Another one out of Maine. Maine report shows majority of users rely on legal cannabis. So 2/3 of all cannabis consumed in Maine came from the legal market, according to the state's Office of Cannabis Policy in a report released June 13th, which is funny because the article we were just talking about was actually saying how Maine doesn't have a track and trace for the caregiver market, so how can they truly confirm that? But anyways, the report analyzed purchase habits for cannabis users and found that the vibrant medical and caregiver market, as well as the state's strong adult use market, has brought a majority of Maine's cannabis users into the legal market. Advocates for Human Potential, a medical system and business research company, conducted the study surveying 1,129 residents in the state about their use of cannabis. About 40% reported use within the previous month. The report shows that Maine's legal market has significantly cut into the state's illicit market with the help of its vibrant caregiver market, because they're not being overregulated and overtaxed. The report found that easy access to an adult use dispensary significantly increased the likelihood that users would rely on legal sources. Although the report speaks positively about the impacts of the legal adult use market, it also shows that easy access to its medical market has likely taken a bite out of the illicit market. The report found that just over half of the consumers that purchase from home-based caregivers lack an actual medical card. As the illicit market appears to be shrinking in Maine, the state is still cracking on improperly packaged and imported edibles, as per a recently released guidance document. Although the report shows enthusiasm for the adult use market, it also shows that most users obtain their cannabis from medical dispensaries or caregivers or from friends or family. All right, in Maine's OCP considering new round of rulemaking on delivery, curbside, and testing. Maine's Office of Cannabis Policy is starting a statewide listening tour as it begins its rulemaking process following the end of the state's legislative session, which saw new laws affecting the cannabis market, including the legalization of adult use delivery and new guidelines of how the medical market should be regulated. Specifically, OCP will be soliciting input about adult use delivery, curbside pickups, and a possible change to the state's cannabis lab testing requirements. Although 2 years after launching its adult use cannabis market, OCP is starting to work on its first major regulatory update. This also comes on the heels of a series of new cannabis-related laws that were allowed to go into effect in May after Governor Janet Mills declined to veto them. In response to these efforts, the legislator passed LD 1928, which limits the ability of the OCP from enacting any substantial regulatory changes in the medical cannabis market without legislative approval. That bill also allows for patients to be approved through the telehealth and increase various legal protections for caregivers. Finally, the legislator passed LD 1957, which eliminated past drug convictions are a barrier to entry into the market, while also replacing the term marijuana with cannabis in all regulation and future legislation. In New York, it's open season for conditional adult use processor applications in New York. So last week, New York's Office of Cannabis Management approved the application process for adult use conditional processor licenses, an integral part of the state's expanding market as farm-based cultivators plan to bring in outdoor harvests in late summer. According to OCM's new rules, cannabis processor license applicants must have applied for a cannabinoid hemp processor license before January 1st, 2022. The license will authorize license holders to process and distribute their own cannabis products for a period of 2 years or until they transition to a non-conditional license. Cronin obtained a list from the state of 33 cannabinoid hemp processors who currently have a license, though there may be more operators who also meet the criteria for the adult use application if they applied for their hemp processor license before January 1st, 2022, and have not yet been approved. The attorney said that some processors may avoid making the switch due to federal illegality or banking issues, but for many it will be a compelling business opportunity. So far, there are 203 newly licensed conditional cultivators, with at least 250 more applicants still waiting for approval. Jeff Lucino has a 12,000 square foot hemp processing and manufacturing site in Spencer, New York, which he plans to convert to adult use if he is approved for a license. Lucino was one of the earlier hemp processors to get a license. His company, High End Multi-Processing, has been up and running since 2019. Lucino plans on submitting an application soon and says he will focus on mainstream products like gummies, tinctures, and concentrates, which he thinks will be high in demand with dispensaries. He is also looking into establishing a hydrocarbon extraction process at his facility. New York's Office of Cannabis Management, OCM, recently proposed adult use packaging and labeling rules. The proposed rules will be published in the New York State Register on June 15th, which will trigger the 60-day public comment period as outlined below. The rules are restrictive. If these rules go into effect as drafted, New York cannabis licenses will not have much room for creative packaging of their products. No surprise. And let's keep on talking about New York rules of packaging, advertising, and testing as states ready for adult use sales. New York marijuana regulators on Wednesday took another step toward setting up the state for the launch of its adult use retail market, approving a series of proposed rules for packaging, labeling, advertising, and testing requirements. Members of the Cannabis Control Board, CCB, said that the new rules will help ensure public safety and prevent underage use. Packages also specifically can't be made to appeal to underage consumers and must be child resistant and tamper evident. With regarding to sustainable practices, licenses must submit an environmental sustainable program for cannabis products packaging as part of the application process, the rules say, and the packages couldn't be made of single-use plastic unless of at least 25% is made from post-consumer recycled content. Yeah, it's like you're adding all these restrictions and requiring this sustainable program, but you're not making it easy on anyone, New York regulators. And again, in New York, dozens of New York cannabis farmers ripping out crops in response to new OCM guidance. Dozens of cannabis farmers in New York are in the process of ripping out cannabis crops following a surprise guidance letter that limits total usable land, including passive vegetative crops, to no more than 1.5 acres. The guidance letter issued by the state's Office of Cannabis Management, OCM, on June 4th comes after many farmers provided documentation and received OCM's approval for plans to use as much as 4 acres to manage both vegetating and flowering plants. As a result, many farmers who spent tens of thousands of dollars on seed, fencing, and fertilizer will also likely lose out on hundreds of thousands of dollars of profit, as they are limited to essentially one outdoor crop this season, rather than 2 or 3. Farmers also sunk money into purchasing fencing for land that can't be used for cannabis grow, laying down plastic for seedlings, and set aside land that can't be used for other crops because they are now fenced in. Farmers tell Gronin that could quickly add up to $70,000, a hefty sum for sole operator farms. Once harvested, New York farms tell Gronin they expect a crop to provide about 1,000 pounds of biomass, which would likely be converted to THC oil. One rule of thumb is about 40 pounds of cannabis biomass creates a liter of oil, which can fetch about $4,000 and $7,000 a liter depending on the market. Using that math, New York cannabis farmers could be out as much as $175,000 because of OCM's new guidance. Wow. Talk about chaos and unfortunate events. I feel really bad for those farmers. All right, Pennsylvania. Let's talk about MJ Freeway. So we all know how I feel about MJ Freeway. While operators complain Pennsylvania seed-to-sale system contract is up and state regulators lack a plan. In April 2022, Pennsylvania's base 5-year contract with seed-to-sale and medical patient tracking software builder MJ Freeway expired. Since then, state regulators, despite regular complaints from cannabis company operators about software bugs and costs, have moved to exercise the first of 3 year-to-year extensions. Meanwhile, MJ Freeway has told operators that the contract has quote-unquote renewed, pressing operators into long-term, expensive tech support contracts. Bullshit. The seed-to-sale tracking contract won by MJ Freeway in 2017, valued at $10.3 million, made the company the required vendor for medical cannabis operators. As a result, MJ Freeway is also able to charge the state's 193 medical program operators up to $80,000 a year for technical support, a service that was originally supposed to be subcontracted to TreeCrum Systems Group, a diversely owned company that MJ Freeway stopped paying for services in 2020, according to a lawsuit filed by TreeCrum and now in mediation. The company has been plagued by technical issues, you don't say, including total system crashes in 2017 and 2019. I just have to pause. Please go listen to the very first 2 podcast episodes under Elevated Businesses under season 1. I detail my experience as a licensed operator overseeing 6 retail locations between 12 licenses between all of the different locations, and how this was an absolutely epic time in the industry. And it kind of flags, for me at least, when I talk to people, like, are you a veteran in this industry or not? Have you experienced that MJ Freeway crash of 2017? Yes or no? Were you on metric? Yes or no? Like, all of these things are like so critically important, because there were plenty of California operators that were on MJ Freeway, but they didn't have metric. They didn't have to deal with like the absolute shenanigans that we had to deal with. Like, to give you an idea, I had a team of 5 women in my auditing team, and we had to go to every single store, do a blind physical count at night to get a physical count of the inventory, and then find what the variance was from that, from physical count to virtually what's in metric, and then do the sales uploads from there, because we couldn't keep up, and our COO made us keep all the stores up and running while other stores actually shut down their doors to reconcile and implement a new software. So my team and I did that through 10 days, got super sick at the end of it, and then waited probably about another 5 more days, and then did a full migration and implementation to a new point of sale system. It was mind-boggling. It was horrible, and a very epic time of sink or swim in this industry. Anyways, back to the article. So since then, Pennsylvania operators tell Gronin that there have been problems with creating integrations for new point of sale and payment systems, long delays in getting technical support problems resolved, and according to Bootner, the system requires operators to enter data manually rather than using automated interconnected systems. Also, if data is incorrectly answered, say from a testing batch, users must wait for MJ Freeway or the DOH to correct it. 2 companies, MJ Freeway and BioTrack, made it to the final round in 2017 for Pennsylvania's seed-to-sale tracking contract through a request for proposals, an RFP. Scoring system that assigned 1,030 possible points in 4 categories. For technical ability, up to 500 points on a sliding scale. Here, BioTrack won almost 50 points more than MJ Freeway. Essentially, MJ Freeway won the contract because it had the lowest bid regardless of the technical quality of its offerings. Mind-boggling. Just stay away. Stay far away. All right, in New Jersey Cannabis Regulatory Commission releases expanded guidelines, released demographic data. In a busy gathering for New York Cannabis Regulatory Commission last Thursday, the commission approved and formally proposed 3 new license types: Class 3 cannabis wholesalers, Class 4 cannabis distributors, and Class 6 cannabis delivery services. The proposed new license types will be approved in August after a public review period. The CRC did not say when the application window would be open. Since New Jersey's cannabis industry is not vertically integrated, applicants looking to break into the market will have to decide if they want to pursue growing, processing, or distribution, delivery, and wholesale. According to state officials, here are a few key points on what the proposed licenses can and cannot be used for. So the Class 3 cannabis wholesaler can purchase usable cannabis products from another cannabis wholesaler, cultivator, or manufacturer for the purpose of resale to another wholesale manufacturer or retailer. They can store and warehouse company, and they can transport usable cannabis and cannabis products to a wholesale manufacturer or retailer. Class 3 wholesalers cannot cultivate or package cannabis on their own, produce, manufacture cannabis products, and they cannot transport, transfer, sell cannabis or cannabis products or paraphernalia directly to a consumer for distributors. Class 4 cannabis distributors can transport usable, unusable cannabis between cultivators and manufacturers, transport usable cannabis and cannabis products between other cannabis establishments, possess and engage vertical storage of unusable cannabis. Class 4 cannabis distributors cannot cultivate, manufacture, or package cannabis or cannabis products, sell cannabis products, paraphernalia directly to consumers, purchase or resell cannabis products. Class 6 cannabis delivery services can obtain cannabis items, cannabis paraphernalia, and related supplies from a cannabis return to deliver to a consumer, transport that usable cannabis and cannabis products directly to a consumer, return sold usable cannabis and cannabis products and paraphernalia back to its originating cannabis retailer. Class 6 cannabis delivery services cannot cultivate, manufacture, or package cannabis products, transport, transfer, or sell cannabis products or paraphernalia to other cannabis businesses other than a return to a retailer where the purchase order was filled, store any cannabis or cannabis products at the administrative office. State officials also moved to expand flexibility for New Jersey micro businesses by clarifying that the area like break rooms and bathrooms do not count towards the 2,500 square foot limit established by the law. They also codified sales limits for recreational consumers: 1 ounce of cannabis flower, 4 grams of concentrate or extracts, or 1,000 milligrams of THC in edible form, and moved to require retailers to provide information to consumers on safe cannabis with the purchase of adult use cannabis products. All right, and Rhode Island becomes the 19th state to legalize recreational cannabis. Rhode Island's governor signed legislation Wednesday making the state the 19th in the nation to legalize and regulate recreational cannabis, an issue that some lawmakers have been working on for years. The law legalizes the sale and possession of up to 1 ounce of cannabis for adults ages 21 and older, with no more than 10 ounces for personal use kept at a person's home. It will also allow residents to grow a small amount at home. 33 cannabis retailers will be allowed in Rhode Island. There will be a 10% state cannabis excise tax, in addition to a 7% sales tax and 3% local tax for the municipality where this sales takes place. Jesus Christ, 20% in taxes. The legalization provides for the automatic expungement of any prior conviction for possession of cannabis that will be decriminalized. The expungement will occur by July 1st, 2024, with an expedited process offered for anyone who wants to have their record expunged sooner. Current fees charged to patients and caregivers for registration in the state's medical marijuana program will be eliminated. A 3-member Cannabis Control Commission to oversee the industry will be appointed by the governor with input from this House Speaker and approval from the Senate. Cool. And just some more stuff happening in Vermont. So Vermont CCB presents new plastic-free packaging guidance. Vermont regulators expanded new cannabis packaging rules that ban the use of plastic without a state-issued waiver at the Cannabis Control Board's June 15th meeting, while reiterating the need for prospective operators to curb illicit activity. CCB Chair James Pepper announced updated packaging guidelines when the legislature passed S-188 last month, which introduced a 60% THC cap on concentrates. Other updates to the state's cannabis regulations were made, including a change in packaging restrictions, which were relaxed in order to discourage the use of plastic. During the meeting, the board approved new licenses for 3 outdoor cultivators, 3 indoor cultivators, and 1 more mixed-use cultivator. The board also approved a second testing lab on Diane, along with the approvals. The meeting's board public comment section continued to bring concerns over the pace of licensing. Board member Kyle Harris framed the issue as being especially important given that there are people in the state who are opposed to having a legal cannabis market. Pepper noted that the CCB has been receiving numerous complaints through its website about seemingly illicit activity. Also in Vermont, this is just their newsletter that they send out each week, which is great. So just to recap real quick, the law does not require you to buy and sell cannabis through a wholesaler. A wholesaler is simply one way you can distribute your products through the supply chain or source products for your store. For a non-cannabis example, think of a grocery store. Many grocery stores find it easier to do business through one wholesale distributor rather than having to worry about having one contract for their radishes, another for their onions, another for their milk, and on and on. However, some businesses prefer those one-on-one relationships and value the ability to choose the particular type of Vidalia onion from one farmer they really enjoy doing business with. Conversely, on the cultivator and manufacturing side of things, some growers or manufacturers may choose to go through a wholesaler to remove some of the legwork involved in getting their products to the public. A wholesaler can take care of that process. A wholesaler may also package their own brand of wholesale products from white label products purchased from another establishment, think Costco or Sam's Club line of products or another store brand products, but with weed. Wholesalers may also serve as a storage option for manufacturers or cultivators with an excess of product, but no means of preserving the shelf life stability within their own facility. In short, a wholesaler may purchase cannabis and cannabis products from one license and sell them to another licensed cannabis establishment, but may not sell to the general public. I love that they gave these examples like Costco and Sam's Club and how grocery stores work. That's so cool. That is your compliance updates for the Northeastern region.